Okay, I'm going to call to order today's Budget and Finance Committee meeting. Today is Monday, August 20th. We're going to begin with resolutions. RS 2018-1362, sponsors Hager, Virtue, and Elrod, authorizes the Director of Public Property to purchase 2 flood-prone properties located at 119 and 121 Commerce Street for Metro Water Services. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Seeing no discussion, all in favor? Opposed? Resolution passes. RS 2018-1363, sponsor Virtue, approves a grant from the Davidson County Mental Health and Veterans Court Assistance Foundation to the Davidson County General Sessions Court to supplement employee salaries and assist in providing direct assistance to Veterans Treatment Court participants. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Seeing no discussion, all in favor? Opposed? Resolution passes. RS 2018-1364, sponsors Virtue, Hurt, and Gilmore, appropriates $40,000 from the Youth Violence Grassroots Initiatives to various nonprofit organizations selected to receive related grants. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Seeing no discussion, all in favor? Opposed? Resolution passes. RS 2018-1365, sponsor Virtue, authorizes the Department of Law to compromise and settle personal injury claim of Adolfo Martinez against Metro in the amount of $7,250. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Seeing no discussion, all in favor? Opposed? Resolution passes. RS 2018-1366, sponsor Virtue, authorizes the Department of Law to compromise and settle the claim of Melissa Harris against the Metro government in the amount of $200,000. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Seeing no discussion, all in favor? Opposed? Resolution passes. RS 2018-1367, sponsor Virtue, approves a grant from the Tennessee Department of Finance and Administration to the Metro Police Department to support the provision of mental health services in the criminal justice system advocacy to victims of violent crime. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Seeing no discussion, all in favor? Opposed? Resolution passes. RS 2018-1368, sponsors Virtue and Van Reese, approves a grant from the Tennessee Department of Transportation to the Davidson County Sheriff's Office to provide litter pickup along state and county roads and education on litter abatement and prevention. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Seeing no discussion, all in favor? Opposed? Resolution passes. RS 2018-1369, sponsors Virtue and Gilmore, approves a grant from the Greater Nashville Regional Council to the Metro Social Services Commission to provide meals that meet RDA nutritional guidelines and transportation services to eligible seniors and handicapped residents. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Vice Chair Schulman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I need to recuse myself from this one.
It is noted. Seeing no further discussion, all in favor? Opposed? Resolution passes. RS 2018-1370, sponsors Virtue and Elrod, authorizes the Department of Water and Sewage Services to enter into a contract with the Tennessee Department of Transportation for access to the TDOT GNSS reference network. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Seeing no discussion, all in favor? Opposed? Resolution passes. RS 2018-1371, sponsors Virtue and Elrod, approves a Keep America Beautiful Lowe's Community Partner Grant to the Metro Nashville Public Works Department to plant trees, daffodils at public schools during Hands-on Nashville Day. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Seeing no discussion, all in favor? Opposed? Resolution passes. RS 2018-1372, sponsor Cooper and Virtue, calls a countywide referendum election to ascertain the will of the people regarding the issuance of bonds by Metro government to be secured by revenues of the Metro government and the lease of public property for the construction of a new Major League Soccer stadium at Fairgrounds, Nashville, and appropriates $50,000 from the undesignated fund balance of the general fund of the General Services District. Councilman Cooper at large.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. 1372 and 1373 are very similar in a way, addressing the same subject. I move to withdraw 1372, and I move the substitute for 1373.
We're going to withdraw 1372, and then when I go to 1373, I'll read the caption just for the viewing audience.
Thank you.
Councilman Glover, are you still seeking the recognition? Yes. Councilman Glover.
Yes, because I was trying to scan through and try and make sure I kind of understood it all. What's the primary reason? I mean, I don't mind voting to withdraw, but I just want to make sure that I'm completely clear on why we're withdrawing.
On what we're doing, Councilman
Yes.
Cooper.
Yes, thank you, Councilman. This is guided by our legal counsel's opinion, who, interpreting 7.05 of the charter, felt uncomfortable in including the land lease for ballot referendum in 1372. And so, since that was included in 1372, I'm accepting his view that the comma and other revenues, comma, did not necessarily apply to a land lease. And however, 1373 is entirely about bonds, which 7.05 refers to.
But in I'm just want to make sure again, the 72 and 73 both specifically address the revenue bond and GO bonds. And then in 73, we still are addressing those. You just kind of changed a little bit of the language with regards to the land piece of it.
Yes,
Okay.
Shaped by our council's opinion, the approval required in this is for the GO bonds, which indisputably 7.05 allows the council to solicit the voters' opinion, the voters' approval for. It does not require the approval of the revenue bonds or of the land lease. Both of those were referred to in 1732. So in 1373 rather, it is asking the voters for their approval entirely of the general obligation bonds, but does have clarifying language in that as to what that is. There are a lot of bond offerings going around these days, but does have clarifying language when we get to the substitute of 1373.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilman Glover. Councilman Sledge.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I need to speak on the committee. I had a question based on the substitute. I'm still a little confused regarding I know that on the substitute.
We haven't moved the substitute yet. We're not there yet.
Okay, then I can wait on that.
Okay, I'll come back to you. So RS 2018-1372 is withdrawn. Now we're on RS 2018-1373. Sponsors Cooper and Vercher. Calls for a countywide referendum election to ascertain the will of the people regarding the issuance of bonds by Metro government to be secured by revenues of the Metro government for the construction of a new Major League Soccer stadium at Fairgrounds, Nashville, and appropriates $50,000 from the undesignated fund balance of the general fund to the General Services District. Councilman Cooper.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I move the substitute.
It's been moved and properly seconded. Discussion. Vice Chair Schulman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Maybe I should defer to Councilman Sledge first, if you don't mind, and then you can get back to me.
I come back to you, okay?
Thank you, Vice Chair. So my question on the substitute was, even though it takes out the portion that's the $50,000 that's being taken out of for the ballot, I'm still would like to ask council if Rule 16 applies here when it comes to a substitute of the original bill, which did have a funding request regarding a statement from finance.
Yes, the part of the intent of the substitute was to redact the $50,000 Election Commission appropriation, but the second sentence of Rule 16 is fairly unforgiving. It states, no committee may consider the legislation until such time as the Director of Finance has furnished such statement. In order to consider the substitute, you have to consider the legislation, and I would submit that Rule 16 precludes consideration by the committee by its terms.
So by those terms, then it sounds like the committee should not be considering this today per our rules.
That's the way I read the Rule 16. Let me read that last sentence again just for clarity. The first sentence makes clear that upon any filing of an ordinance or resolution requiring the appropriation or expenditure of money the Director of Finance is allotted 20 days to determine the availability of that funding. The second sentence says, no committee may consider the legislation until such time as the Director of Finance has furnished such statements, or 20 days has elapsed since the legislation filing. In order to consider the substitute, you have to consider the legislation, and we're precluded from that, absent a suspension of the rules, from that consideration by Rule 16.
Thank you, Councilman. So, Attorney Jameson, parliamentary-wise, because we have a motion and a second on the substitute as it relates to 1373, and you're saying Rule 16 does not afford for the committee to consider the substitute.
I would suggest that the sponsor, the movement, request suspension of the rules of Rule 16.
Councilman Cooper.
Follow-up question for our counsel. Isn't this, in effect, an authorization and not an appropriation? And that this bill should be followed by a subsequent appropriation, which would then have finances input?
Right. It's the second verb that gets to me, the appropriation or expenditure of money. Anytime we authorize a referendum, we have typically within the same legislation the expenditure or appropriation to the Election Commission, and we're authorizing that in this one. The substitute removes that, but to get to the substitute, you have to get to the original.
All right. And so you're saying a subsequent resolution for funding would not be appropriate, and that there would be 20 days required for finance?
Correct.
Now, is finance able to waive that requirement? Since we're talking about $50,000, and the question is, do we have $50,000?
So the requirement is not that they take 20 days, it's that they have up to 20 days. So they could answer the question at their convenience anytime between now and the 20th day.
All right. Well, that is a question for finance. Do we think we have the $50,000 to pay for this?
I'll just have to wait until it gets formally submitted to me.
Okay. So then, counsel, your advice is to request a suspension of the rules?
Correct.
All right. Well, then let me request a suspension of the rules.
There's been a request for suspension.
I was looking. I'm sorry. There's been a request for the suspension of the rules. Any objections?
3 objections, it takes 2, so
Okay, so
deferred by rule.
it's deferred by rule. Is there any other discussion on, it looks like we still have council members in the queue. Vice Chair Schulman?
Yeah, it's deferred by rule, but I did have a parliamentary question, if that's okay. So tomorrow, suspension of the rules, or he can't do anything because it's not been referred to. This committee didn't take any action, but can the councilman do the exact same thing tomorrow night?
He can. So
Okay.
the rule he'd be deferring, then Rule 15 requires bills to have a committee recommendation. So he would move to suspend Rule 15 and request the full body's consideration at that point, in addition to 16.
All right, thank you.
Great clarifying question, Vice Chair. Councilman Glover.
Thank you, Chair. Well, let's go back and let's look at just a few things, and then I would like to discuss perhaps one other option. If we go back to an article that was in the city paper, which I've read here once before, we clearly got an opinion in that from, and I was in this particular meeting, that at that time the council attorney was Cooper, and he says that he feels like it would require another public vote to undo what we did in 2011. And I think that's the intention of what both you and Councilman Cooper are trying to do, is to actually let the public vote. And for us to think that we can't find $50,000 when we're going to obligate the city to over $4 million in general obligation repayment, et cetera, is almost ludicrous. So with that in mind, what I would like to do is request that the Director of Finance can give us an answer by Thursday, and that we ask to move for a special meeting Thursday evening, because that will still fit within the time of the 75-day window in order to get this on the ballot on November 6th. If we're going to play little games, that's fine, but don't think the people aren't watching, and don't think the people are not looking very seriously at us skirting our responsibilities. Now, I read the article just like you guys did that says we have a job to do. Let's do it. Let's do our job. Let's vent the thing. And before we commit the city to another $4 million in long-term debt, when we could not accommodate cost of living adjustments, when we did not accommodate most anything else that we should have done first, for us to think that this is okay, I'm certain that some people do think it's okay, but I'll tell you, for me, no, it's not okay, because we basically are just, we're basically snubbing the general public. And so I think this is a dangerous move. Of course, we're going to do what we're going to do, but I'm going to request right now, that way we can give public notice, that way we get the 48-hour notice, that I would like a special called meeting Thursday night to discuss this very issue, and one that is of that much importance. So with that, I don't know how we do it. Mr. Jamison, I don't know if I make the request to the acting vice mayor or to the chair here, or how we do it, but I'd like to go on notice and saying it's that important that we have this conversation. Thank you.
The charter allows special called meetings to be called by either the mayor or vice mayor. The charter specifies that you have to have 48 hours notice from the announcement until the next meeting is conducted. The two problems that I think you'll encounter is, number one, the finance department's 20-day period will still be going on. So on Thursday, they can still stand up and say, we get our full 20 days. The second problem is that it would not be announced until tomorrow's meeting, even if she started it at 6:31. 48 hours later would be 6:31 on Thursday. And my concern is that the Election Commission probably closes at 5 o'clock. So even if this council convenes Thursday, gets through its business, passes the resolution, gets it executed through the clerk's office, and then delivered to the Election Commission's office, I doubt there's anybody there to accept it.
Well, the good news is I went ahead and thought past that. And I actually reached out to the Election Commission, and actually, if we pass it here, we actually can send it on to them, and they actually have a window of opportunity to be able to put it on there at their discretion. Doesn't mean they have to, just like it doesn't mean that the finance department doesn't have to tell us, could we accommodate $50,000 when we're talking about literally $120 million worth of debt obligation or for the general obligation bond by itself. So I will simply state that because you want to talk about people getting furious out there. I mean, this will literally just pour more gasoline on the fire. And so I think, again, I don't know the exact rule, but it's very clear that we just voted to not allow him to suspend the rules, to go ahead and have the discussion on the floor about this. So I'm making a formal request that we have a special called meeting Thursday night, because apparently we all know what's going to happen tomorrow night, even if he asked to suspend the rules tomorrow night. So given what we anticipate, I think we owe it to the voters to have this conversation. And frankly, I think they need to see who's not willing to let them vote to spend their money. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilman Glover. And just for the viewing audience, to be clear, and you can correct me, Mr. Jamison, we can't consider the resolution because the suspension of the Rule 16 failed, correct?
That's Rule 16.
Rule
correct.
16. Council Lady Dow.
I just wanted to ask a question. Do we have what constitutes a formal request to the Finance Department? Like, is that written anywhere? Like, what is a formal request? And the reason why I ask is I'm not too sure about that. I don't know if we have any precedent whether we followed this before. It seemed like that we have put some charter amendments in the past that had financial implications, and I don't recall getting any type of a financial advisement, but I can't be certain. I just don't remember this historically in the past and it being interpreted that way. So I asked the question, what constitutes a formal request? Like, you know, if I ask, do we have it, is that a formal request? Does it have to be submitted in writing? What is a formal request?
For the finance department to consider legislation?
Right, because we've had people ask on the floor and amend and submit things on the floor about financial things. So I was just curious as to, is a verbal request not a formal request, or does it have to be in writing? What is it? What's the rules on that?
So in this case, absent a letter that delivers it to them, it's the publication of the agenda, and I contacted the finance office as well just to verify and point out that there is particular legislation that has, as originally drafted, a financial component. But the agenda was published on Wednesday.
So if the agenda was published on Wednesday, then what other notes do you need from Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday? So how do you explain that?
It's not, it's 20 days that they're entitled to.
But it's not that it's because it's formal, because it's been out there for 5 days, right?
Correct.
Right. So I think this is just a loophole. How do we change the 20-day window, especially when we're talking about $50,000? And, you know, I just think we have to be fair about this, is that I think we all know that there is $50,000. And, you know, whether you agree with it or not, I mean, we should just vote it up or down versus, I think, having these trivial discussions about whether or not someone formally requested $50,000 when we know we have $50,000. So, yeah, just the availability, because it's, as I understand it, is just asking that we appropriate. So I'm just confused about, on this, if they're just asking to appropriate, it's not saying that it's funded, it's just saying that they request an appropriation of $50,000 to cover the cost of funding a referendum. There's no guarantee that the referendum is even going to pass here on the council. So isn't this request just saying, if it does, then we're asking for an appropriation? When we come back and ask for an appropriation of money at that time?
We typically, in any referendum legislation within the same legislation, make the appropriation to the Election Commission for whatever amount of money is necessary to fund that particular election.
Is there a rule that it has to be done at the same time?
No.
So there is no rule that it has to. So he can, I mean, could we not take the $50,000 out and just ask this referendum and come back with a financial request?
That's what the substitute attempted to do.
Okay.
We didn't get to move the substitute because the suspension of the rules failed, so we didn't get to consider it.
Yeah, I saw that. Thank you.
More discussion, Councilman Cooper?
Well, just as we move on to the general discussion about soccer later in the agenda, given the difficulty of the last year, again, I so agree with Council Lady Dowell that using an excuse, sort of a technical excuse not to have a referendum, is problematic, and ultimately we are spending the taxpayers' money, and asking voters for their opinion is what we are all about, and I would encourage the council not to be short-sighted and to consult the people on this kind of large spending decision. Now, it is within the administration's purview, I suppose, to use this technicality of not being sure whether we have $50,000. Oh, we're not sure we have $50,000, and in order to defer this important public measure. But it's time that we moved beyond this sort of secret deal-making process that has gone on in soccer, and I do believe the referendum would provide sunshine and transparency to the process. And so thank you, Madam Chairman, for just letting me footnote this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councilman Cooper. I think it would have been even more critical considering that the conversations and the negotiations as it relates to the community benefits agreement has stalled, which 31 of us signed and expressed our support of. So we'll just see how it unfolds tomorrow night. We're going to go on to Councilman Glover.
So I'm going to ask this question, if I may then. I do believe that we are supposed to honor what the people have requested. I do believe that we're supposed to honor the 2011 referendum that the people voted on with over 70%. So here would be my question. I think this is important enough for the folks out there. I certainly don't want to spend any more money on elections or do another election or anything else. I don't think any of us do. We've had more this year than I think ever in our history. But given the magnitude of this and what we're doing and the amount of money that's going to be spent and the overall economic environment that we have now created in Davidson County, what would be required, Mr. Jameson, and you can give us an opinion on this, not right now, but by tomorrow, please, what would be required for the proper filing and then a special election for this particular piece of legislation with regards to giving the people the opportunity to vote? And when we say, well, we heard you before, but we really didn't hear you, but we're not listening to you now, I would like to know what the options are, and I'd like to know that by tomorrow. But I do renew my request for a called special meeting for Thursday evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. We're on to RS 2018-1374, sponsor Glover, request the Metro Department of Finance to investigate the appropriation of an amount not to exceed $20,000 to Box 55 Association for reimbursement of fuel costs for volunteers. Councilman Glover. Is there a second? It's been moved and properly seconded. Councilman Glover.
All right, so for those of us who've been trying to really pay attention to what's going on with our fire department, our police, et cetera, this is a group of volunteers that go out and not only do they volunteer their time, but they also round up Gatorade, water. If our firefighters are out there, first responders are out there for a long period of time, they also bring them food, and it never costs anything. These are people who literally volunteer every bit of their time. And for some reason, a couple of years ago, unbeknownst to myself and maybe others on the floor here, we stopped paying for the gasoline or the diesel or whatever to run Box 55 trucks. So it's not like they're running on vacation with these things. They're actually going to these fires and they're going to these emergencies and things of that nature. And if you haven't been to an active fire and watched our men and women come out of these buildings with all their gear on and seeing just how dehydrated they become, this is really a critical thing, in my opinion. And so I'm requesting that $20,000 be found for us, up to $20,000, for us to reimburse Box 55 for actual fuel cost on those particular vehicles that they use to take care of our first responders. And let's just find out if, again, we can try to figure out what priorities are like in Nashville and take care of the people who are taking care of us every day. And with that, I renew my motion to approve.
Is there any more discussion? It's been moved and seconded. Any other discussion? Seeing none. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Resolution passes. Now we're on bills on second reading. And it's BL 2018-1188, sponsors Cooper and Vercher, amends the Metro Code to establish procedures for high-value real property transactions. Is there a motion? It's been moved and seconded. Councilman Cooper.
Thank you, Madam Chairman and co-sponsor. In discussions with Finance today, needing the consultation of planning, I think we've made a good start on this. I see the Director of Public Property here, Mr. Berry, that deferring this to the second meeting in October to collect all of the various responses from the departments seems like a good idea. So with that, I make a motion to defer this to the second meeting in October.
There's a motion to defer the second meeting in October. All in favor? Opposed? It's deferred to the second meeting in October. BL 2018-1205, Glover, sponsor Glover, prohibits Metro from approving the sale, lease, transfer, or conveyance of property adjacent to the proposed Major League Soccer Stadium to any third party for purposes of private development. Is there a motion? It's been moved and seconded. Councilman Glover.
Just very briefly, I mean, I deferred this indefinitely until I kind of saw the way the wind was going to blow and where this was going. The thing I've heard from both sides, I think, I don't want to speak on anyone's behalf, but what I heard from both sides is, you know, if the stadium's going to be there, that's one thing. But if we're going to start providing free land for these types of deals, et cetera, that's a completely different other subject. So the purpose of this is just to find out, I mean, are we doing a soccer deal or are we doing a real estate deal? And so for me, if we can agree that the soccer stadium, we're good with that going there, and if we now have to start providing free land in order to make a deal worthwhile for the city, then I have to question, is it worth doing the deal from the beginning? So with that, I renew my motion to approve.
Thank you, Councilman Glover. Councilman Sledge.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So a couple of things on this. So I know that it was mentioned just a little bit earlier, and we'll probably get into it on another bill regarding the community benefits agreement conversation that's occurring. That conversation is occurring solely around these 10 acres. That is the negotiating point between Nashville Soccer Holdings and Stand Up Nashville. It's something we don't get to vote on because it's a third-party agreement. But if this portion is removed from the Fairgrounds Improvement Plan, then they have nothing to negotiate over. And so that obviously creates a pretty big problem regarding some of the community benefits. I think, as the chair mentioned, 31 of us want to see. So I would hope that we would not go forward with this. And I do want to make one other point, that there are deals that we do all the time regarding lease agreements between the city and private contractors. I just toured one last week where we're doing almost 160 units of affordable workforce housing on a lease from Metro Land, where we provided the land and the builder is building the land. We do that with Barnes Trust Fund deals all the time, where we provide back tax land and they do the construction. And I do want to point out that there have been lease agreements that we'll get into. In fact, I think I have an amendment on one of these bills that talks about how the lease payment just went up in one of these bills to the tune of something like $16 million. So with that, I would ask that the committee not approve this resolution.
Vice Chair Schulman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This may be relevant to the next couple of bills as well, but I guess I would ask Mr. Jamison or maybe Mr. Cooper. So we've had these discussions for a while, and that is in terms of the responsibilities and obligations that were committed when we first started this. These situations where the folks who are trying to bring soccer in made commitments, Major League Soccer. Is there a way to explain kind of all the commitments that are riding on these things in terms of, particularly in this case, it would be with the 10 acres, that there are obligations that have been, that are basically committed to based upon our passing these pieces of legislation? And I'm not sure who to direct that to. I know this question has come up before.
Probably both of us. So 910 adopted in November conditionally approved the issuance of the revenue improvement bonds by the Sports Authority, subject to about 10 conditions. In response to similar legislation in the past, the administration has expressed the concern that if you add to those conditions, it would be tantamount to sort of changing the conditions after an agreement was reached. I assume the team looks at those 10 conditions and says, if we meet each one of those, then the deal is on. If you added something, then that's, no one has uttered the word breach, but that's sort of the analogous argument that they're making. And I don't know if I'm doing justice to the administration's position, but that is what has been submitted previously.
Mr. Cooper, anything to add to that? Again, I guess what I'm trying to make sure is clear is that we've got these measures coming. The 10 acres is a part of the overall deal that was worked out. If we start pulling these things out, what I was trying to do is figure out what are the ramifications for starting to do that. I know these things have to be, we've got measures coming up that we have to vote on. But the question is, if you start pulling things out of the overall transactions that have been at least temporarily agreed to until the council takes final action, what are we doing? And Mr. Wilshire, maybe you can explain that.
Is this on? I'll take a shot at it. I mean, look, this council has every right to make every decision on everything that it does. I mean, there's no question about that. But it is, I think, important to take a step back and understand that this is part of the overall package that was negotiated and that is presented before the council, that is endorsed by the administration, the team, and everybody else. This is sort of part of the deal. And as a side note, we happen to think it's a great one that's going to generate property taxes for the city, for the general fund, the 10 acres. It's going to generate, we believe, we hope, affordable housing, and is going to generate a dedicated revenue stream to fund the operations at the fairgrounds. But even stepping aside from all the benefits of it, and we can debate that whenever you guys want, this is part of the package. And to your point, I don't want to say there's a breach or anything else like that, but it's just like saying, you know what, actually we think that the team ought to pay $50 million a year to Metro to fund schools. Like, you could just add anything on to it, and it's just a different deal. I mean, maybe they would accept that. I would suggest that that's not something that would be financially viable. So I'm not sure that directly answered your question, but I was trying to give the overall picture of what's going on.
Well, so I guess what I'm trying to understand, and maybe this is not answered by this specific bill, but when the MLS people came to Nashville and unveiled that Nashville was one of the cities out of all the ones that were competing that was going to get this, there was a whole series of agreements or transactions that were worked out to make this a part of the overall deal. So if we start pulling away different pieces of it, I think maybe my direct question is, does that start jeopardizing the entire situation from the standpoint that we may not get soccer after all?
Yes. I mean, the team has said definitively having this development as a part of the overall package is critical both to the financing of the overall deal and to the overall fan experience. So, yes, I'll just say definitively, taking this away breaks the deal apart.
All right, thank you.
Councilman Prodmore.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That pretty well answers a lot of the questions, but I do have one. I just want to clarify. Are we giving away free any Metro property, any property for free? Are we? The statement's been made. I just wanted that clarified. Any property is being given away.
No, sir. It's a 99-year lease, but they are paying an annual lease payment that has escalators in it. So the answer to that is no.
Thank you.
Councillady Henderson.
Thank you, Chair Vercher. What is the annual lease payment as negotiated now?
As submitted to you in the legislation, the agreement provided for 30 years at $200,000 a year. Subsequent to the filing of the legislation and what was submitted to the Fair Board and approved last Thursday is now a 99-year lease. It was always a 99-year lease, but now there will be 99 annual payments. After year 30, there's a 5% escalator clause every 10 years. And so that's what the Fair Board approved, and there's an amendment to the ground lease ordinance before you to incorporate those provisions.
So it remains at
Right.
20, what was in the existing ordinance, that remains for 30 years with the escalator happening subsequent to that, so $200K per year as.
Right, and you also have to factor into that the parking revenue sharing. So if the parking revenue sharing is over that amount, then the Fair Board would keep the higher amount.
And can you state, please, then what the revenue share is, please, on the parking?
It's 50% of the parking revenue from non-soccer events at the stadium.
And is the parking infrastructure anticipated to be within the 10 acres that we're discussing?
This is that did not factor in the parking within the development. The development itself will have parking for the development meeting the requirements of the zoning code. The revenue sharing is for all of the other parking on the fairgrounds.
So surface parking?
Correct.
But there's no revenue sharing in the structured parking that would be a part of the 10-acre development, and can and will that be used for shared parking for MLS,
I
flea
know,
market, et cetera?
I know when they did the parking study, or as part of the review, they did not factor in the parking from the private development into those numbers.
So would it not make sense, though, if many have parking concerns related to all these, uses happening at the same time, that's not at all under discussion? I guess I'm confused as to why there's not some sort of conversation about the interplay of that available parking space that would be done through this development, because that seems to be, frankly, one of the reasons why you would say, okay, well, this is related, it supports the use, et cetera. It's needed, according to everybody, to make this deal happen. So why are these two things happening in isolation?
Well, it is likely that there will be parking on the private development that will count towards the revenue sharing. But for purposes of calculating the number of spots, it is presumed that the parking within the private development will be for the private development. But on weekends, if there is commercial activity that is, office space Monday through Friday or whatever, there may be extra parking available for events at the stadium.
Maybe, and we're speculating. So I guess my question is, have we not discussed this or come to any sort of contractual understanding as it relates to the parking, since that seems to be a concern? Or are we just saying we'll work it out on the back end?
Well, again, the parking for the mixed-use development is per the zoning code, and it is for the spaces that the development will need. So that, that's
understood, but MLS and the soccer holdings are presenting this as a sort of symbiotic thing, right? To make all this work, that development needs to be there. So I'm just wondering why we're not having the conversation about how these are all going to work together.
Well, for example, there's a residential component, and so the spaces for the residential component cannot be used on those days. So I think at this point they don't know what the number of spots will be available for stadium events.
So they haven't already done that analysis about how many residential units they're going to have and how many parking spaces they'll need and how that relates to the MLS events and all the existing uses of the fairgrounds. That analysis has not been done yet?
The overall development, not all components of the development have been fully planned.
Right, so they're all just kind of hypothetical at this stage, but they're still all needed. Mr. Wilshire?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
Well, I guess what I'm trying to understand is, according to the folks with which the mayor's office is negotiating, this is necessary to the success of soccer and MLS. Yet, it does not appear that there has been much work as to, what would be on parcel A, parcel B, parcel C, or block, or however we're referring to them, or what is the retail residential mix, or how many parking spaces will they be, and for whom will they be, and how will they be shared?
Yeah.
So, it just seems in a kind of conceptual way, I mean, I think people can understand, again, at that conceptual level, that some of these are, you know, they have catalyzing effects, that there's other things going on and there's retail there and that supports the soccer. And so we can all kind of talk about that in a kind of conceptual, hypothetical space. But it just seems that, you know, when we're really kind of getting down to it and the heartburn that everybody has over this 10 acres, and you are just asking us to kind of rest on, you know, the folks who are negotiating this deal says they need it and they have to have it. And if we don't do it, then this all falls apart. So I think it's incumbent upon them to provide more information. Perhaps it's been done, but I don't feel like it's something that we've seen.
Sure. I'm sorry. I think there may have been some miscommunication here. Your question was whether the parking on the 10 acres was required for the overall parking? That was the original genesis of the question.
That was what prompted my question, but I think it is more broadly, it just seems, you know, parking is an aspect of this, how much residential there is, what's the mix of all that kind of stuff. And it just doesn't seem that there's been the depth of analysis that one would hope for us finalizing this deal, which is all relevant to whether or not Councilman Glover's bill would advance that wants to extract the 10 acres.
Sure. So let me, and I apologize, if we have not provided that information to you adequately, that is my fault. I'll take responsibility for that. There has been quite a bit of work done. I think what Legal Director Cooper was addressing directly was that out of an abundance of caution, the consultants who were looking at the parking for MLS events did not include availability of any parking. It's not required. There may be some, right? If, presuming, we believe that there's going to be a mix of commercial space there, retail space available. We don't know exactly what that configuration may look like, but there may be parking for the retail that, in fact, is available on game day. And so there may be some additional spots. But out of an abundance of caution, to address the questions that this body has had about parking, what they have said, the parking consultants have said, and we'll get you that information again, we've gotten it to you, but we'll send it again, that excluding any parking on the 10 acres, there is still more than adequate parking at the fairgrounds, far more on a ratio basis than First Tennessee Park has, Bridgestone Arena has, or Nissan Stadium has. So directly answering your question, the analysis has been done that it is not needed on the 10 acres. Now, to your question about the exact mix, the exact number of units, I think we have some pretty good estimates about the number of residential units, the amount of retail square footage, and what the plans are, and we'll get that to you, and we'll go through that with you. And we haven't answered your questions. I hear that, and so that's on me to help make sure that that happens.
Okay, so last question would be, I think, you know, likewise, in an abundance of caution, if we've not used what might be structured parking that comes through this 10-acre development into the parking analysis, I wonder why we would not then likewise, in an abundance of caution, say, if you are getting a sweetheart deal for these 10 acres, we are going to require you to provide this much parking to be shared. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so what the deal is, and Legal Director Cooper, please correct me if I get the details wrong. The deal that is before this body is that the lease payment for the 10 acres is the greater of 50% of the parking at non-soccer events for the stadium, or $200,000. That doesn't say whether it's here or there or wherever. But so to the extent, I think that's right, that there's parking revenue generated on the 10 acres for non-soccer events at the stadium, those funds would be captured, collected, and paid to the fairgrounds. And so it will be included, and that is what is written in, and I apologize for us not communicating that to you clearly.
Okay, I appreciate you for clarifying that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Wiltshire, I just have a following off of Council Lady Henderson's. Did we ever figure out like the overflow parking? I was at one meeting, I believe it was Councilman Swope's special call meeting, and that was a concern as it relates to the overflow parking. I believe it was suggested that they were going to be parking on the track.
Yes, there is discussion, and I don't know where the latest that is. I will follow up with you, Councilwoman. There was a question whether or not the operator of the events at the track had consented, and there were some questions about sort of having parking on the either parts of the bank of the racetrack or the infield of the racetrack, and I'll follow up with you.
Okay.
I don't know what that resolution was.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Council Lady Dow.
I just wanted some clarification. I would just say that in my 7 years, and I've actually, before then, observed how we went through the process with building a convention center. I think this is probably the worst communicated in information. I feel like I'm being spoon-fed, and when I think I understand everything, I find out something new with the parking. I don't think we've done a thorough job of going through this. I was very excited about the soccer stadium, and now I just really don't know what we're getting into, to be honest with you. I want you to go back to this, because this the question people ask, and I'm glad you clarified that for Councilman Pridemore when he asked, you know, are we giving away 10 acres of land? So I'm glad you clarified that it is a 99-year lease that will revert back to the city after 99 years, and that they're paying an annual lease amount on it with a increase over the time. But I want to go back to what you said about the revenue sharing of the parking. When people in our community ask us, like, what are we getting out of it? Like, how are we benefiting? Like, what money from this is going in our general fund that we can use in our districts to provide things that we need? You know, how would you answer that?
You bet. Thank you for asking that question.
Yeah.
Look, this is one, again, look, all of the, and I apologize, you're right, there are a lot of details, and this body has appropriately gotten into a lot of details, and so it's hard to explain it from a 30,000-foot view, and then when things come down, it feels like there's more information trickling out, and I'm sorry for that. So I will try and do a better job. In terms of the revenues that the city is generating and the costs that the city has, I think it's, one, important to keep this in the context of broader stadium deals. There is a tremendous benefit that's detailed for you in the information that was provided to you in the response to the council's questions from the economic impact study performed by the University of Tennessee that talked about two things. First, it talked about the revenues generated, both sales taxes, primarily sales taxes, during the construction period. And second, it talked about the ongoing taxes generated by sales taxes and other taxes in the city, hotel motel taxes from when folks come to attend the games and spend money in restaurants in the city. And so there's an overall economic impact from that. And those are significant figures that are in the economic impact analysis. Specific to these 30 acres or whatever that's got the stadium and the 10-acre private development. I think the great story here is that while, and Councilman Glover's been very diligent about pointing this out, there is some potential financial exposure for the city, not potential, there is real financial exposure to the city in the first 10 years from a $4 million guarantee for the first 5 years of the ticket tax collected and the sales taxes collected at the stadium that then drops down to $3 million a year in the next 5 years. So that's the potential cost to the city of that piece. In addition, because we're investing in the infrastructure here and in the upgrade to the facilities here, there are effectively $50 million of bonds that are going to be utilized to fund those two things. The city will be generating directly from the 10 acres what we estimate to be about $2 million a year in property taxes. Depends upon exactly what's constructed, to Councilwoman Henderson's question, and what that is appraised at and what the millage rate is at that time. But if it's $175 million development and property taxes are about 1.262% of appraised value and it's appraised at construction cost, it's going to generate about $2 million a year in property taxes. And so of that, half of it goes to the general fund to pay for parks, schools, and all the other things in the general fund, and half of it goes to a specialized fund to be dedicated to uses at the fairgrounds to improve the fairgrounds. On top of that, there will be, we believe, sales taxes generated on at the 10 acres, which would not be captured to repay the bonds. Now, there could be an argument made, and I think it's a reasonable argument, that those are funds that people would spend elsewhere, meaning if they didn't buy a dress at a shop in those 10 acres, they'd be buying a dress somewhere else in Davidson County. And so we'd still be generating those revenues. I think it's safe to say, given the proven increases in tourism that come with having a professional sports team, it's reasonable to assume that there will be many people coming to our city who otherwise would not, spending money in our city, otherwise who would not, staying in our hotels and frequenting our restaurants, otherwise who would not, generating that economic impact. I'll pause there because you look like you want to ask something.
I was just going to ask, because I've heard this spill before, to be honest with you. I heard it with the baseball stadium. I've heard it with just everything. It's like, oh, we're going to be generating these sales tax revenue when we create this zone, and we're going to have this tremendous revenue overflow. But I found myself questioning all of that, because how are you going to measure whether or not you're generating any additional sales tax revenue from this project? And the real dollars that we know that we can capture are those in property tax when those properties are developed. But from what you're saying, and I understand, is that we won't collect 100% of that. That's going to be split there. So I go back to every time we have one of these deals, the selling point that we use for the city, and I've backed quite a few of them, is that we're going to generate this sales tax revenue that's going to go into our fund and create opportunities for us to fund things in our cities and our community. But, this budget season, we find ourselves in a situation where we didn't have all those sales tax revenues, apparently, because we were not able to fund our budget this past year. So I'm just trying to figure out other opportunities for us to share some of the revenue on that piece of property. And the other piece is, I'm not, when you said would you say pre-construction or construction costs, as far as, is it the developed costs or the costs prior to construction when you talk about the property tax?
The property taxes are based upon the appraised value, so it's
after it's developed.
After it's developed, yes, ma'am.
So how are we going to measure? For example, when you tell us today that we're going to, this person did this study, and they said, once we build this, we're going to generate this amount of additional sales tax revenue from people coming into the city and the hotel tax. How do we measure that? And where is the measurement? Where can we see, for example, a study shown that people are coming into the city to see the Nashville Sounds play? That's what we were sold with the Nashville Sound Stadium, that we're going to generate all this additional tax revenue from people coming into our city, staying in our hotels, and this is going to benefit. So how are we measuring that? And do you have a tool in place right now to tell us, once we're done, this is how much sales tax revenue that you predicted that we generated just because people came to a soccer game?
Yeah, so the property tax is going to be pretty easy to measure, right? Like there's a property, it's paying property tax, that will be easy. Your question about sales tax is a much harder one to assess directly. And so there are a number of things that we can do, and we can talk to the team about it. Unfortunately, under state law, you're not able to go into a business and say how much is generated by this business in this place. The state law prevents you from doing that. And so we can't go and collect directly the sales generated by individual businesses, which makes sense, right? Private businesses don't want their sales revealed in that way. But what we can do, and we can talk to the team about this, I probably shouldn't just be bringing it up now, but we can try and look at the number of tickets that are sold to zip codes outside of Davidson County or outside of Tennessee. I certainly hope that most of the fans in the seats are supporting the team and are locals, but we could certainly try and see if we can get some tracking on the number of percentage of seats that are sold to tickets that are sold to folks from outside. That'll probably underestimate the percentage of fans who are there visiting, because folks may, buy a group of 4 and 3 of the folks are from outside, or they may purchase some tickets on the secondary market. But we can certainly talk about that and try and track the number of visitors. And so I think there are some mechanisms that we can try and utilize to try and estimate the economic impact. And we've tried to do that on some other instances. I will remind this body, look, this was a very tough budget year the past year. I mean, you guys don't need me to repeat that. But the revenues of the city increased by $120 million a year 2 years ago, and then last year, $120 million before the $25 million shortfall of property taxes. And the property tax rate is now the lowest in the history of Metro. Sales taxes have been increasing by tens of millions of dollars a year each year. And that doesn't say everything's perfect or that every decision has been right, but I think that the decisions that this body has made in terms of how to grow economic development in this county have proven to be successful. I mean, it has. This body has created an economic environment that has generated substantial increases in tax revenues despite plummeting property tax rates.
Well, I would say this, that I think we have, and I agree with you, we've grown our sales tax revenue, but obviously not enough to cover the substantial growth and the cost that we have associated with growth. And the other thing that I've observed over the 7 years is that we continue to take real estate off of our property tax rolls by putting them in redevelopment zones and giving them to NDHA. So we're not really benefiting as much as I think we should from these properties that are in these redevelopment zones. And we're getting ready to vote on tomorrow, taking another big bulk of property, handing it over to MDHA to collect property tax and repatriate into that development. So we want low taxes. I mean, ideally, that's what I was hoping for. That's why I support these types of deals, because I tell myself that, guess what? The more we can grow our sales tax revenue and property tax revenue from these other things, the less my neighbors will have to pay in property tax. But again, we still are having problems funding the growth in this city. So we still have a problem. And I think we should be exploring every way possible to generate revenue, not just sales tax revenue, but property tax revenue, and seeing how we can take money outside of these developments and put it in our general fund to pay our teachers, to pay our police officers, because you see everything that's going on in the city right now, our fire department, because those are the essential things that people want and they want to spend their money paying for. And that's why I think we get into these tough decisions when we have projects like this come about, is because the people of the city are not comfortable with the talking points that we keep giving them about sales tax revenue, and then out in the streets, they're talking to their local school teacher and the firemen and the policemen who are saying that they're not getting compensated, and we can't have fire trucks and we can't have extra patrols because they're not getting paid. So I think, you know, I would be very interested in understanding more about the parking, because I do see that as an opportunity to generate some extra revenue. But I'm not, you know, I appreciate the work that you've done, but I will say that this is one of the deals that I felt like we have not had a real good amount of information and a lot of transparency from the beginning to understand everything with, so that we don't have so many questions. But thank you for answering those.
Thank you, Council Lady.
You're welcome. And I'll just add, I mean, to your point about stuff being on and off the property tax rolls, I mean, that's one of the reasons we're so excited about this. This is taking 10 acres, currently generating zero property tax for this city, and now we'll be generating, we hope, we expect, $2 million plus of property tax. So,
Press your button again. Okay, there you go.
Again, you know, we're bringing in transient neighbors, we're bringing in cars, so all of that has a cost. So, you know, how much would it cost if we sold that property and took a lump sum of cash right now in the open market, put a 30-story high-rise on it, and sold each one of those units? You know, so I don't know if we ever sit down and weigh all the options of things. We talked about that with the blue ribbon thing earlier today. You know, we just decide we're throwing this in with this development to help cover some of the costs, but I don't necessarily know if that's per se the best use and generate the most money for us. I mean, it's generating something, but I think there are other costs associated with it. And I think when we talk about development, we need to start considering the cost that comes with developments. When you put in 350 apartments, you have school costs, you have infrastructure costs, and you have all of those other things. Do they cover their costs when you put them in? I'm not too confident of that, and I think I've said that before, but thank you.
Councilman Mendez.
I know this is just, this isn't the actual legislation. This is Mr. Glover's. And on that, I've been, my position has been that what we passed last year, Resolution 910, gave the council all sorts of ability to approve or not approve the remaining conditions. And I'm generally not in favor of adding new conditions. I did want to mention briefly, since the highly touted 99 years worth of rent has come up, the present value to Metro today, the first 30 years, is about $3 million. And so for the first 30 years worth of rent, we could put $3 million in the bank today at 5% interest and make the same amount of money. That extra 69 years from year 31 to year 99 adds only $1 million worth of present value. So we could put $1 million in the bank today at 5% interest and make just as much money as we would on the last 69 years of this lease. So it's important to not buy into the misleading rhetoric that the extra payments are worth $16 million when the present value today is only $1 million. And I know we got the actual legislation to get to, but I wanted to add that since the rent came up.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Cooper.
Thank you, Chairman. I wanted to take a sharp issue that the 10 acres produces zero. Because 1.6 million people are using that. I mean, it is insulting to take the exact land at the fairgrounds that we have been using for 100 years and saying that it's valueless and producing nothing. Public land has a value. Public land has a value, and the need for this awarded land shows that this is a bad location decision, and the taxpayers are being asked to put a $250 million stadium that is in the wrong place. Why? There is no study, analysis whatsoever. I have repeatedly for months asked this same question whatsoever, why this is the right location for Nashville. And the land is trying to turn a bad stadium location into something that is not as awful. And in the end, it will destroy the current fairgrounds, and we will still have a badly located stadium. Why is it badly located? Because the gift, the award, the cheap lease on the 10 acres of land is required to bring development to the stadium. The development of public land cherished and utilized by 1.6 million people. We have to eliminate that to bring development to the stadium. In fact, we should have taken the stadium close to downtown to be the benefit for all of Nashville in an actual location decision that was professionally made. But that has not happened here. So have the stadium, but put it in the right place. And the award, the gift, the lease of the 10 acres is confirming that it is not in the right place. But worse, it is insulting to people who have used this land for 100 years as public citizens, and to say it has no value. It has a ton of value. And it is cherished. And it is telling you that the fact that you have to give it, award it, lease it, the exact location of the fairgrounds, the exact location, the exact buildings that for 100 years have meant quite a lot to a lot of people. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councilman Cooper.
Councilman, you are absolutely. I'm sorry. May I speak just for a moment? I want to apologize.
Sure. Yes.
You are absolutely right, Councilman. That was verbally lazy of me to say that the land doesn't have value. It has tremendous value. And what I was saying in that is because we can do this project, have the 10 acres be developed and be increased in value to the city, but not cost or compromise the uses of the fairgrounds, that there's not a cost to it in that sense, that we're actually taking the land, enhancing it, and enhancing the fairgrounds and improving the activities there. But you're right, I should have said it more completely than simply saying it could be done because it's not generating tax revenue in that way. We actually think that the uses of the fairgrounds will be enhanced by this development. I apologize.
Thank you so much, Mr. Wiltshire. Is the car museum still part of the project too? I think I read something regarding that. That's a question, a serious one.
Car museum?
Oh, okay. I thought I read that somewhere. Councilman Pulley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of questions. I didn't fully vet this, but I did read an article that Austin, Texas is exploring a similar deal down there, and I believe they're using 24 acres as one of their incentives down there. Do you know anything about that?
I would not consider myself informed enough about the Austin project to speak it in totality. I believe that Councilman Sledge has spoken about that previously, but I don't know the totality of that deal. I know certain aspects of it that I, like you, have read in the newspaper.
Okay.
But
all right, that's good.
and read what's information's available online.
So with respect to the 10-acre deal here, would you consider the stadium deal absent the 10 acres as other stadium deals go? How does that compare? Because the way I understand this is we're floating $225 million in revenue bonds that essentially would be paid for by 3 or 4 different revenue sources associated with the team, and then that's going to pay for the stadium. That's a pretty good deal, is the way I see it. So this 10 acres incentivizes that deal in some way. Is that not correct?
I think that's certainly how we would see this as well. Yes, Councilman.
And it's no longer free. Using Councilman Mendez's figures, then there are $4 million in present value going towards that land. Is that correct?
That would be correct. In addition to the affordable housing that will happen there, which we certainly hope happens out of the community benefits agreement, and the property taxes that would be generated. Yes, sir.
Okay, all right. And without this 10 acres, we don't have the CBA that's currently being negotiated and moving forward, as I understand?
Yes, sir. That is correct. The
Okay.
CBA relates specifically to these 10 acres.
All right. I have nothing further at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Pulley. Councilman Glover.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Jameson, I guess I just want clarification because the rules seem to change rather frequently in this particular deal. So with regards to the resolution where we authorized, if everything else comes into play, then the Sports Authority could issue these revenue bonds. It is my understanding that if any of those conditions are not met, then the whole deal dies. Is that correct?
That's correct. Under 910, all conditions have to be met.
So in other words, if this body does not agree to do any demolition, the deal's dead?
Correct.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that I understand where we are on that. And then I also would like to ask, we did this resolution in, was it last November, wasn't it? Yeah, that's what I thought. Now, the raise that we promised the employees, the 3% cost of living adjustment, when did we vote on that? Was it after November or was it before November?
The preceding budget was in June of 2017.
Okay, and would you have said that that was a binding promise that this government, that this body, that the administration did with the staff of Metro for not only for our police and whatever, but people in public works, for all that we had obligated ourselves to a 3%. We actually passed a bill saying this is what we're going to do. And would you say that was that? Would you say? Let me say. I'll just say it this way. Was that giving the people of Nashville our word that this is what we're going to do for our employees?
It was the pay plan for we had a 3-year pay plan specifically. It's subject to subsequent legislation, which in fact did change it, but at the time it was considered the pay plan that the council and the administration promised, if you will.
Okay, and then so, but like you said, there was subsequent legislation that was available and et cetera. And I guess what I'm hearing here is there's really not any substitute legislation that's available to us. It's either this or they walk away and the deal blows apart and blah, blah, blah. And then, Mr. Wilshire, I got to tell you, thank you, because sometimes I don't remember the exact numbers. I try my best to. But I think the people of Nashville need to take away we did generate an additional $120 million a year. And so based on that, what we've done, and if you really want to see the seriousness of where we are, we couldn't find out of $240 million worth of revenue, we couldn't find $18 million this year to honor the cost of living adjustment. And let's talk about the $2 million in property taxes that we're hoping for. First of all, everything I've read about this, they actually have a 2-year before they're supposed to be open with it, and then they've got 3 1-year extensions. So logically, it could be 5 years. I mean, is that a fair assumption? Absolutely. Okay. 2 years just to build And then you said a $50 million general obligation bond, but I will contend that we've already approved $12 million, so it's $62 million that is going to be utilized out there. That will generate a payment, a principal and interest of a little over $4 million is the best guesstimate that I'm coming up with. The city will get $1 million in property tax revenue. The fairgrounds will get $1 million in revenue. So I'm trying to figure out how are we coming out ahead? How are we breaking even? And I hate to say even in this deal. But again, I think that's where a lot of people on this floor have questioned this from the very beginning. And as each week passes and new memos come out, new revelations are shown to us, this deal's been worked on for several years. We just found out about it about a year ago. And now we're down to this piece of it, and a lot of questions still are not clear. I mean, quote, answers, but I don't think this is utopia. This certainly is not going to generate the kind of revenues that's actually even going to pay for the general obligation bonds that'll be required to repay. So we need to be very clear that we made a promise to our employees. We didn't think that was important. We reneged on that. But this one, oh my goodness, this promise is more important than the other promise. Now, when I was raised, a promise was a promise, and it still is in my book. And so I really hope we all keep that in mind as we continue down this path, because this is not the sweetheart deal. Just like the Sound Stadium is not the sweetheart deal that we were told. I didn't vote for that one. I didn't vote for this one. And, you know, there comes a point where there's only so many dollars that'll be spent inside of Nashville, Tennessee. And if we keep dividing the pie much greater than we've already done, then we're going to continue to go down the path where we are. And so if the employees of Metro are okay with realizing there will not be a cost of living adjustment next year, probably nothing the following year, and we can talk about how low our property tax rate is, but at the end of the day, we're still generating more money than we were 3 years ago in property taxes. So the millage rate is, yeah, it's relevant, but it's not as relevant as the lack of spending management that we've done. So with that, I will ask again to support this, and if it gets overturned, that's fine, but I think it's important for people to understand what our view is and what we consider our promises to be. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Councilman. Seeing no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? No. We're going to need a show of hands. All in favor?
2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Hold them high.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I got 5, 6.
Opposed? Hold them high.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to 6. 6 to 6.
It's 6 to 6.
So there's no recommendation.
Okay. No recommendation from the committee. 6 for, 6 against. Now we're on BL 2018-1289, sponsor Sledge and Virture. Approves the demolition of certain buildings and structures necessary for the construction of a new Major League Soccer Stadium at the Fairgrounds, Nashville, and to impose a privilege tax on the sale of tickets to events at the new Major League Soccer Stadiums. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Councilman Sledge.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this legislation regards two things, as you heard. One is the ticket tax to be placed like we do for every professional sports franchise, and the other one regards the demolition, which, as you know, both of these votes, one under state law, one under the charter, require a 27-vote threshold on third and final reading. So that's why you see them together in this legislation. I can refer to finance a little bit on the ticket tax and why it's set it where it is. I did want to speak just briefly to the demolition piece. As y'all know, demolition of any property that was on the fairgrounds at the time of the charter comes to us. We have to have a 27-vote threshold. We have voted previously in this council to demolish certain structures on the on the fairgrounds that included the kind of dilapidated volunteer village and the bathroom facility that was on the northern portion of the property where actually the new expo facilities would go. And I wanted to speak just a minute about that because I know in the previous discussion that was being held, we were talking about land of no value and public land that was cherished and whatnot. This land that the new expo facility will be on, where there will be just as much new expo facility space as there is right now, that's kind of spread out along where these buildings that are requested to be demolished. Right now, that property is used for nothing. There's nothing on there except RV hookups, which are used occasionally, and then the DUI booking station that goes out there every few days a week. So if you see blue flashing lights off of Wingrove Avenue, that is usually because folks are using that as a mobile booking station. So what occurs, obviously, is that the new expo facilities would then move to that area again, which is basically vacant, and then the 10-acre development that we've been speaking about would go over part of that footprint. And I know that there was also a question about, since it all kind of ties together, about the 10 acres where this where this demo request is. Somebody had asked about the Austin deal, Austin MLS deal. So the Austin Council last week approved their acceptance or plan to do an MLS stadium in an area of town called McCalla Place. McCalla Place is viewed as a fairly desolate area. There were 24 acres of city land over in Austin. But the reason they thought they could make it work was because right nearby was a mixed-use development called the Domain, and so they thought that it would draw enough people over there that the two could work in symbiosis. So with that, I would ask for your approval.
Seeing no further, Councilman Cooper.
Thank you. Before we get to the vote, I think it's important to establish why we're having the vote, which is a charter amendment. And the charter amendment was written to prevent the redevelopment of the fairgrounds. And section 11602D says the premises of the fairgrounds, not limited to the State Fair, Expo Center, flea markets, auto racing, shall be continued on the same site. Now, I really take that to mean the site where they are, right? Not elsewhere on the 125 acres of the fairgrounds. And so I think it's important to recognize that the public, I believe, felt that they were voting for a charter amendment really to make redevelopment at the fairgrounds difficult because, of course, valuable public property will be wanted by private parties, which is what has happened here. I think no is the right vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Cooper. Council Lady Henderson.
Thank you, Chair Vercher. I feel like I read this many months back, but can somebody please speak to the ticket taxes, how they were calculated, what they are directed to cover, and how they compare, say, to Titans, Sounds, and otherwise, since this ordinance, interestingly, deals both with building demolition and ticket taxes, which one would think would be separate things, but if we could speak more specifically to the ticket taxes, please.
Mr. Wiltshire, you want to, or Attorney Cooper?
So the ticket tax was part of the overall negotiation because that is revenue that is used to help pay the debt on the stadium. Under state law, ticket tax revenues for municipal stadiums must be used for the facility itself. They cannot be used for any other governmental purpose. The amount of the taxes starting at $1.75, under state law, you're limited to 10% of the ticket price, so you cannot exceed 10% of the ticket price. The $1.75 was set, the team working in consultation with MLS as an amount that is reasonable given the ticket prices for MLS games. Within that ticket tax, there is a amount set aside for capital improvements that we do not have in the some of the other ticket tax provisions for other stadiums. So that will kick in, I believe, in year 6 to start providing some funding that can be used for capital expenditures. It goes up, so it'll, starting in year 6, it will increase by 50 cents and then 75 cents in year 7 or 8 through 30.
Okay, so to 225 and then to 250.
Correct.
Okay, and then, so that gets put then into a fund for long-term capital improvements, such as what we see at the Titan Stadium, seat replacement and
Yes,
so
ma'am.
forth, and that becomes, it's a dedicated account for
Correct.
that. Okay, thank you.
Councilman Mendez.
Just on that last point about the ticket tax, comparing to other stadiums, I'm going to share some details about Bridgestone and how it works. And if anybody in the administration feels like I've got it wrong, I'm happy to be corrected. A number of years ago, about 10 years ago, a secondary charge was added to the Bridgestone tickets, and that's $2 per ticket. For Bridgestone, that generates about $2 million per year for capital improvements. And every bit of that, it's not getting accumulated. Every bit of that gets used every year. The Sports Authority took out a $10 million line of credit for capital improvements, and then they spend on that line of credit for Bridgestone. I think the most recent balance was between $7 and $8 million. They take that $2 million that gets generated from the ticket tax every year, or the capital, the seat fee for capital, the $2 a ticket, and they pay down on the line of credit, then they spend on the line of credit. So when you think about long-term capital improvements, for example, the talk around Bridgestone is that on a 20-year-old facility, there might be $150 to $175 million worth of capital improvements that are desired over the next 20 years. And the $2 a seat that's been being collected for the last 10 years really won't address that at all. And you'll recall that we voted to stick into the CIB $50 million of general obligation bonds for Bridgestone to deal with the real significant capital cost. So I think it's fair. I don't know which way it cuts, but just from on your vote, but from a disclosure point of view, the amount of money that we're talking about on this ticket tax is more appropriately thought of as sort of year in and year out capital improvements, not that it's going to be some giant pool of money that will take care of the, what you'd expect any big stadium might need 20, 25 years down the road. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Mendez. Seeing no further discussion, all in favor? Opposed? Okay, we're going to need a show of hands. All in favor? Raise them high.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5. Okay. And then all opposed.
Opposed?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Motion fails. 5 to 7 fails.
5 to 7. 5 for, 7 against. Budget and Finance will be recommending disapproval. Now we're on BL 2018-1291. Sponsors Sledge, Virtue, and Betnay. Declares property surplus and approves the execution and delivery of a ground lease between the Metro Board of Fair Commissioners and Nashville Soccer Holdings Development, LLC, for the construction of a development at the Fairgrounds, Nashville. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Now we're on discussion. Councilman Cooper.
Thank you, Chairman. A question for the administration. Who is declaring this surplus?
Ultimately, it's the council. The Fair Board voted to declare it surplus on Thursday. The council, by ordinance, has the authority to do whatever it wants to with property. So the council, through adoption of this ordinance, would be declaring it surplus and authorizing the lease.
Thank you. Under what power does the Fair Board have to declare the property surplus? I looked at the charter, and then also in their rules, they have the private acts, and the private acts say you can acquire property. But at no point do any of the private acts say that you can dispose of property.
The property is owned by the metropolitan government. The council passed an ordinance some months ago requiring all long-term leases of metro property to be declared surplus. So the Fair Board was just acting as per the council
So
ordinance.
really the Fair Board's action is not relevant to this.
It was a procedural vote. I mean, ultimately, the council makes the decision what to do with the property.
Okay. So a follow-up question, how do you declare something surplus, assuming their action was legitimate? How do you declare it surplus when you're using it?
The board voted in approving the long-term ground lease that is what the board thought the property should be used for, and that was the best use of the property.
Well, but they're saying by calling it surplus that it's surplus, and doesn't our surplusing process mean that when an agency of Metro declares something surplus, that then it is offered to the other departments? Has that happened?
So this is not like a typical, we don't need the property surplusing. This is property that is...
Well, I'm sorry, I didn't know that there were two types of surplusing.
The council, by ordinance, has the authority to do whatever it wants to with the property. Each ordinance or every ordinance has the same weight as every other ordinance. So from a legal standpoint, the council voting to approve this lease and declare it surplus is legal. This property was for a specific
So
purpose.
it's legal because the council is stepping in and overriding all these sort of normal historic procedures because we have the power to override everything, not that we're following a process.
That is correct. The council.
Please
yes.
repeat that. Not that we are following a process.
Well, that's actually not true because this went through the same mandatory referral process that all other surplus property.
Was that true? I see Mr. Berry here with public property.
That absolutely is true, yes.
Every other department looked at this and said, we don't dare touch it?
It was handled just like every other mandatory referral process.
Every other mandate, okay. So the Fair Boards, which may or may not have had the power to declare it surplus, declares it surplus even though they are currently using it and desperately want it back and replaced for them somewhere else. Right? Because you're going to have to rebuild the fairgrounds completely.
It's all part of the master plan that the fairgrounds approved. Yes,
I believe it's part of the master plan, for sure. Thank you, Council. I appreciate your candor in this, and thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councilman Cooper. Councilman Glover.
Okay, so I tried to really understand what exactly was done last week with regards to the surplusing, and I must admit that it's a little beyond challenging for me because I don't think I ever saw a legal description of what exactly we were surplusing. Mr. Jameson or Mr. Cooper, whoever, was there a legal description of the 10 acres that we surplused or that we think we may have surplused?
Prior to execution of the lease, there will be a legal description, meets and bounds description, that has not been prepared as of today. I inquired to see if that had been completed, and that is still in process.
So
what was submitted with the council legislation is the sketch showing the property to be leased.
Right. Well, okay, I'm glad you brought that up on the sketch because in November last year, we worked off of a sketch that's ended up changing, and a lot of things have changed since November. So is it appropriate, Mr. Jameson, that we're going ahead and doing this now without having the legal description of what exactly we're doing? Because I fail, I mean, I'll be the first one to admit, when it comes to real estate stuff, I couldn't tell you how it's measured, how it's surveyed, and all that sort of thing. But right now, I think it's basically just a blank surplus of some property over at the fairgrounds that we're being asked to support.
The council could approve this on second and await the legal description prior to third and final if it so chooses.
Well, okay, so, and I realize, I mean, I think the opinion may be that the Fair Board really, A, didn't have to surplus it, or B, didn't have the authority, just they can fall on either side. But given the fact that they've already surplused the property on what they thought their requirement was it premature for them to do that without having the legal description? Because that's the land that they, I mean, they're literally charged with that 117, 125, whatever. They're legally charged with that piece of the metro pie. And so was it handled appropriately or inappropriately without a legal description of what it was that was being surplused?
I think because at the end of the day, it's the metropolitan government property, and it's eventually the determination of this body and not the Fair Board that governs. I would construe their approval as more advisory than binding, certainly not binding on this body. But other than that, I can't speak for the Fair Board.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Councilman Swope.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think Mr. Glover just did exactly what I was going to ask, which is how can the Fair Board approve a blank piece of paper when there's no meets and bounds legal description at all? And I would recommend to the committee, of which I'm happy to address here, that we might want to have a meets and bounds legal description before we go blanket surplusing approximately 10 acres somewhere on the fairgrounds property. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Swope. Councilman Mendez.
Is this one amendable on third reading?
It is. There is an amendment pending now that has not yet been offered by the sponsor.
So which exception does it fall into for being amendable on third?
I'm sorry. This is not amendable on third. There's an amendment pending now that is in the packet and has not been offered.
So the absence of the legal description is, it's not awesome, but in trying to make myself feel better about it, I looked at the lease that's in the package, and it says that the 10 acres is the tract of land described and depicted in Exhibit A, and the map is what we've got for now. And the map, the map doesn't say I would have thought that somebody would have at least scribbled in 10 acres here on the drawing in the lease. I guess so we're being asked just there is no, I'm trying to find what the protection is in the language of the lease that we know we're talking about.
Well, the exhibit that was filed with the legislation includes the 3 mixed-use tracts that form the 10 acres. So what is identified as mixed use on the sketch is the 10 acres.
So I know, you know that, and I know that. I guess I'm trying to connect the dots of where in the legislation or the lease it says that's the case.
It describes it identifies the 10 acres as the mixed-use development. The other part is the stadium. So I think that's sufficient, but before the lease is executed, certainly there would be a legal description. The council is being asked to approve the agreement in the form of, and so when the meets and bounds description is completed, it will be part of the agreement.
All right, thanks.
Thank you, Councilman Mendez. Councilman Sledge.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So first, I think I need to move the amendment, and then with a brief explanation, if that's okay.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor? Opposed? Now we're on the bill as amended.
Okay, thanks. So the amendment that you guys just put on, in Section 5, subsection B, is where you're going to see basically what was negotiated by the Fair Board last week and reported. So you can see that there is an escalator that's placed in that I think was discussed on a previous bill regarding that after that during the first 10, after the 30th, for 10 years afterward, you've got an escalation of $10,000, and then you see that 5% escalation after that period of time. So I was going to ask Finance if they could just indicate sort of what is the difference now in anticipated revenue between what is on the original bill and then the bill as amended. Or I could ask Legal One. Just.
I did the math just sitting at my desk by hand, and it came up to 16.8 million total over 99 years, which is not discounted for present day value, but that's the total amount.
Okay, and that's just the lease payment that we're talking about.
That's just the extra lease payment over and above the $6 million that was already in there.
Gotcha. That's what I wanted to get to. So basically, that lease payment rounds out to about 23 million. Then, okay. All right. So that's what's involved there. So I would, so I would ask that you support that because that's 23 million that we're not currently getting. So.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Mendez, discussion on the bill as amended.
Yeah, with all due respect, 23 million, some of which is payable in 2117, it's not worth 22 million. It's worth 4 million today, which is, take that for whatever you want on y'all's votes, but don't think it's worth 22 million.
Y'all's vote. Councilman, you have to vote too. Seeing no further discussion, all in favor? Come on, committee. All in favor? Opposed? No. Okay, show of hands. Raise them high.
All in favor?
All in favor?
2, 3, 4, 5. 5.
Mm-hmm. Opposed?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 5 to 6 fails.
5 to 6. Budget and Finance will be recommending disapproval. Now we're on BL 2018-1293. Sponsor Gilmore amends the Metro Code to impose a privilege tax on the sale of tickets to events at the new Major League Soccer Stadium. There is a letter to approve from the sponsor. Is there a motion? It's been moved and seconded. Vice Chair Schulman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Mr. Jamison, as I remember, this is a $3 charge?
That is correct.
And what is the money designated to go for?
So by state law, it is restricted to the operation or construction of the stadium. It can't have any other use for the municipality. It's also $3 as long as that's at or below 10% of the ticket price. If it exceeds 10%, then you have to drop down to 10%.
Okay, so I read the analysis. I'm just trying to make sure we're clarified. So obviously, we just had a measure before us that had a ticket tax on there. This is an additional ticket tax, or is this would be, instead of the $1.75, this would be $3?
Right. So historically, whichever ordinance the council adopts last governs. So that would be the conundrum with this one.
So it's a conundrum. Okay.
Mr. Jamison, I know the sponsor isn't here. Can you, if you can, provide some insight as it relates to the sponsors? I mean, we know the intent, but some more pertinent details as it relates to the ordinance.
I wouldn't repeat any discussion, but there really wasn't much to, I put everything into the recitals that was the sponsor's intent, I believe. So the request was for a $3 ticket tax. To make it legal, it had to be capped at 10%. The understanding, unfortunately, is that the proceeds are restricted to essentially the operation of or construction of the stadium. We can't use those for any other metro purposes. So to the extent this would conflict with the other ticket tax, again, historically, the way the council has operated is that the last adopted governs. And so this would be a bit of a conundrum with the previous ordinance.
Vice Chair Schulman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I like the use.
The committee can make recommendations on both, despite the inconsistency, with the floor to decide the final tomorrow.
I mean, my preference is almost to defer this one meeting, but I'm trying to figure out the timing of it. I don't know if this could, if we all decided to do the $3 fifth, would eventually hold true if it passed after everything else. Because I don't exactly understand what we're doing here, I think I would move to defer one meeting.
It's been moved for one meeting deferral and seconded. Any discussion on the deferral? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? It's a one meeting deferral. Now we're on to BL 2018-1296. Sponsors Vircher, Roten, O'Connell. Approves a revocable license agreement between the Metro Board of Parks and Recreation and Gloco LLC for the use of Riverfront Park and Ascend Amphitheater. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Council Lady Dow.
I'm sorry, I read through the description, but I wanted to get a little bit more information about what is Gloco. There's someone that could speak to that.
We have Director Odom.
Good evening, Monique Odom, Director of Metro Parks. The Gloco representatives are not here this evening, but this would be a holiday lights attraction to be at Ascend and a portion of Riverfront Park. It's a revenue-producing attraction, and all the expenses to be borne by the event organizer.
Oh, sounds good to me. I like lights. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Odom. Seeing no further discussion, all in favor? Opposed? Bill is recommended. BL 2018-1297, sponsors Roten, Vircher, and others, authorizes the Metro Department of Water and Sewage Services to enter into an agreement with KJPL Riverwood LLC to fund the operation and maintenance of a public pressure sewer extension for its development at the Village of Riverwood. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Seeing no discussion, all in favor? Opposed? Bill is recommended. BL 2018-1298, sponsors Vircher, Bettany, and Elrod, authorizes the acquisition of certain right-of-way easements, drainage easements, temporary construction easements, and property rights for the purposes of the Brewer Drive sidewalk improvements. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Seeing no discussion, all in favor? Opposed? Bill is recommended. There is a 6 o'clock TOD meeting. But for that, Budget and Finance, we are adjourned.